The shovel struck something that wasn't dirt. Marcus Holloway froze, his weathered hands gripping the handle as metal scraped against metal in the pre-dawn darkness. He'd been digging behind the old oak tree for 20 minutes, sweat cutting tracks through the dust on his face despite the October chill. The hole was meant for fence posts, nothing more. But now, 3 feet down, something gleamed in the lantern light. A tin box, rusted at the edges, but intact. He knelt, brushing away clumps of earth with trembling fingers. The box was heavier than it looked, and when he pried off the lid, his breath caught. Inside lay a stack of letters tied with a faded blue ribbon, the same ribbon Sarah used to wear in her hair. Below the letters, a small leather pouch clinked with coins, gold coins. Marcus sank back on his heels, staring at his wife's handwriting on the topmost envelope. For when the time comes, it read in her careful script, "Trust your heart, not your fear." Sarah had been dead 2 years now, claimed by the fever that swept through Millfield that terrible winter. He'd buried her just 50 yards from this spot, beneath the cottonwood she'd loved. In all that time, she'd never mentioned hiding anything here, never mentioned gold. A branch snapped in the darkness beyond the lantern's reach. Marcus's head jerked up, his hand instinctively moving to the Colt at his hip. "Who's there?" Silence stretched between the shadows and the oak tree. Then barely audible, "Please don't shoot." The voice was young, female, scared. "Step into the light," Marcus called, rising slowly to his feet. She emerged from behind a cluster of mesquite bushes like a ghost materializing from memory. Couldn't be more than 17, with dark hair hanging in tangled waves and clothes that had seen better months. Her left shoulder was wrapped in blood-stained fabric, and she clutched something against her chest, a bundle wrapped in what looked like one of his own stolen blankets. "I'm sorry," she whispered, swaying slightly. "I didn't mean to. I was just looking for somewhere safe to rest." Marcus glanced at the open box beside the fresh hole, then back at the girl's pale face. Whatever she was running from had driven her to his land in the dead of night, wounded and desperate. And whatever Sarah had hidden here, it seemed the time she'd written about had finally come. The girl's knees buckled, and she started to fall. Marcus caught her before she hit the ground, the bundle in her arms shifting with a sound that made his blood run cold, the soft cry of an infant. "Jesus," he breathed, looking down at the baby's tiny face peeking out from the folds of his stolen blanket. The child couldn't be more than a few weeks old. "He's hungry," the girl whispered, her eyes fluttering as she fought to stay conscious. "I tried to feed him, but I can't." "Easy now." Marcus helped her to the porch, settling her in Sarah's old rocking chair. The same chair where his wife had spent countless evenings, humming lullabies to the children they'd never had. "What's your name?" "Elena." She cradled the baby closer. "Elena Vasquez." The surname hit him like a physical blow. Vasquez. He knew that name. Everyone in 3 counties knew it. Carlos Vasquez ran the largest cattle operation south of the Rio Grande, but he was also known for his temper and his iron grip on his family's honor. "If this was his daughter, who's after you?" Marcus asked, though he suspected he already knew. Elena's eyes darted toward the road. "My father's men. They've been tracking us for days." She looked down at the baby, and her voice broke. "They want to take Miguel away from me. Send me to the convent in Santa Fe like I'm some kind of—" She couldn't finish the sentence. Marcus studied her face in the lamplight. Young, proud, terrified. The baby stirred in her arms, making soft sounds of distress. Somewhere in the distance he heard it, the faint thunder of hoofbeats on hard-packed earth. "They found us," Elena breathed, struggling to stand. "I have to run." "No." The word came out harder than Marcus intended. He placed a gentle hand on her shoulder, guiding her back down. "You're hurt, the baby's hungry, and you won't make it another mile on foot." Elena stared at him with wide, desperate eyes. "Then why are you helping me? You don't even know me." Marcus glanced toward Sarah's grave, visible in the moonlight beneath the cottonwood. The letters were still scattered by the hole he'd dug, his wife's words echoing in his memory. "Trust your heart, not your fear." "Because," he said quietly, "someone once told me that doing right isn't about knowing someone. It's about knowing yourself." The hoofbeats were getting closer. Maybe 6 riders, moving fast but not recklessly. They knew their quarry was wounded and on foot. They could afford to be methodical. Marcus made his decision. Follow me. Marcus scooped up the letters and gold, shoving them into the leather pouch. There's a root cellar behind the house. You and the baby can hide there until Holloway. The voice boomed across the valley, stopping Marcus mid-sentence. We know she's here. 6 riders emerged from the darkness like demons conjured from shadow, their horses snorting and stamping in the yard. The man in front sat tall in his saddle, silver conchos catching the lamplight along his jacket. Carlos Vasquez himself. His face was a mask of cold fury, and the rifle across his pommel wasn't for show. Bring her out, Vasquez commanded. Bring out my daughter and my grandson, and we'll leave you in peace. Marcus stepped protectively in front of Elena, his hand resting on his gun butt. I don't know what you're talking about. Don't lie to me, gringo. Vasquez's voice dropped to a whisper that somehow carried more menace than his shout. Her blood trail led straight to your porch. My Elena has always been willful, but she's disgraced our family enough. She's not property, Marcus said evenly. One of Vasquez's men shifted in his saddle, and Marcus caught the metallic click of a hammer being drawn back. The night air crackled with tension, thick as smoke from a grass fire. My daughter chose to spread her legs for some Pendejo drifter instead of accepting the husband I chose for her, Vasquez snarled. She chose to birth a bastard instead of taking the medicine that would have solved this problem quietly. And now she chooses to run rather than face the consequences of her actions. Behind Marcus, Elena made a sound like a wounded animal. The baby began to cry, thin, hungry wails that cut through the darkness. But I am not without mercy, Vasquez continued, his eyes never leaving Marcus's face. Give me the child, and Elena can return home. The boy will be raised properly, as befits his station. My daughter will enter the convent and pray for forgiveness for her sins. And if I refuse, Vasquez smiled, and it was the coldest thing Marcus had ever seen, then I will burn your house down around all 3 of you, and tell the sheriff you were harboring criminals. Who do you think he'll believe, Carlos Vasquez, or some broken-down Anglo hermit? The baby's cries grew stronger, more insistent. Elena was sobbing quietly now, clutching her son like she could shield him from the world through will alone. Marcus looked at the 6 rifles pointed at his chest, then at Sarah's grave glowing pale in the moonlight. The smart play was to step aside, let Vasquez take what he'd come for, and hope the man kept his word about leaving him in peace. But smart wasn't always right. Before you decide, Marcus said quietly, let me tell you about my wife. Vasquez's eyes narrowed. I didn't come here for stories, viejo. Sarah and we tried for 15 years to have children. Marcus kept his voice steady, conversational, even as his heart hammered against his ribs. 15 years of hoping, praying, watching her face break a little more each month, when nature reminded us what we couldn't have. Senor Holloway, Elena whispered behind him, you don't have to. She used to sit in that chair. Marcus continued, nodding toward the rocker where Elena held her baby. Every evening she'd sit there and rock, humming lullabies to children who only existed in her dreams. I'd watch her through the window sometimes, and it would tear my heart clean in half. One of Vasquez's men shifted restlessly, but the patron held up a hand for silence. The fever took her 2 winters ago, Marcus said, but before she died, she made me promise something. She made me promise that if I ever had the chance to protect a child, any child, I wouldn't let fear stop me from doing what was right. He reached into his pocket and pulled out one of Sarah's letters, the one marked, for when the time comes. With steady fingers, he unfolded it and held it up so the lamplight illuminated her careful handwriting. She knew this day would come somehow. Left me instructions, provisions, everything I'd need to help someone who needed helping. Marcus's voice grew thick with emotion. She wrote, a child's life is worth more than a man's comfort, Marcus. Don't let our own sorrows make you blind to someone else's hope. For the first time since arriving, Vasquez's expression flickered with something other than cold fury. Behind him, one of his men, barely older than Elena herself, lowered his rifle slightly. Your wife was a good woman, Vasquez said finally, but my family's honor, your honor. Marcus stepped forward, and remarkably none of the guns tracked him. What honor is there in separating a mother from her child? What honor is there in forcing a young woman into a convent because she chose love over arrangement? Elena rose from the chair, her baby quiet now in her arms. Papa, she said, and her voice carried across the yard like a prayer, please, look at him, look at your grandson. She stepped into the lamplight, and for the first time, Carlos Vasquez truly saw the child his daughter held. The baby had stopped crying, and was staring up with dark, solemn eyes, eyes that looked remarkably like Vasquez's own. The patron's hand trembled slightly on his rifle. The silence stretched like a held breath, until Marcus thought it might shatter the night itself. Then Carlos Vasquez slowly dismounted his horse. He walked across the yard with measured steps, his spurs chiming softly against the packed earth. When he reached the porch, he stopped just outside the circle of lamplight, his weathered face a map of internal war. May I? He asked quietly, extending his hands toward the baby. Elena hesitated, then carefully placed her son in his grandfather's arms. Vasquez held the child with surprising gentleness, studying the tiny features in the golden glow. The baby gurgled and reached up with one small fist, catching the silver button on the old man's jacket. He has your mother's hands, Vasquez whispered to Elena. Strong, stubborn, his voice cracked slightly. Beautiful, Papa. I was afraid, Vasquez said, never taking his eyes off his grandson. Afraid of what people would say, what it would mean for our family's position. I forgot that families are built on love, not reputation. He looked up at Marcus, tears glistening in his eyes. Senor Holloway, your wife was wiser than I gave her credit for. A child's life, a family's love, these things are worth more than a proud man's comfort. Elena began to cry again, but these were different tears. Does this mean, it means you're coming home? Vasquez said firmly. You and Miguel both. And if anyone in this territory has something to say about my daughter and grandson, they can say it to my face. He handed the baby back to Elena, then turned to his men. We ride home, all of us. His gaze fell on Marcus, and we make sure word spreads that Carlos Vasquez considers Marcus Holloway a friend to his family. As the riders prepared to leave, Elena approached Marcus one final time. Why? She asked, echoing her earlier question. Why did you risk everything for strangers? Marcus looked towards Sarah's grave, where the first hints of dawn were beginning to touch the cottonwood's branches. Because love doesn't end when someone dies, he said simply. It just finds new ways to grow. Elena kissed his cheek gently, then climbed onto the horse her father brought for her. As the family rode away into the breaking dawn, Marcus gathered up Sarah's remaining letters and the small fortune in gold she'd left him. The last letter was addressed simply, for after. Inside, in his wife's familiar handwriting, were just a few lines. The gold is for whoever needs it most. The love is for you to give away. Both will come back to you tenfold when you least expect it. Trust your heart, my darling. It knows the way home. Years later, when Elena's son was old enough to ride, he would visit the ranch where his grandfather's friend lived. He would sit in an old rocking chair on the porch and listen to stories about a woman who planted seeds of kindness even after she was gone. And Marcus would smile, knowing that some promises are kept not just once but again and again, rippling outward like stones thrown into still water. In the distance, the cottonwood swayed gently in the morning breeze, its leaves whispering secrets only the dead and the living who choose love could truly understand.